Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TCAF 2021 kickoff panel. This is serious. My name is Miles Baker. I'm the executive director of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. Very excited to finally be kicking off the festival and sharing a lot of the hard work that the team has been working on for the last few months. I'd like to take this time to acknowledge the original caretakers of the land that I am on, the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Wendat peoples. I'm joining you today from my home that is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations. This area is also covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. The events of the past 15 months have changed us all, and there's still so much more change to come and change that needs to happen. How can we better share and care for the land and the planet as a whole? What does it mean to live and work on colonized lands? For our part, TCAF is committed to strengthening its relationships with Indigenous communities and increasing Indigenous voices and perspectives in our programming. So what does our programming look like this year? We spent a lot of time considering how best to adapt our physical show into an online space. And I think we've come up with a pretty cool solution for 2021. Some of it was fairly obvious, like our programming is all sort of translated into Zoom calls like this. And I'm happy to say that Libraries and Education Day and Word Balloon Academy are coming back in forms like this. What was a lot more tricky, and it's such a core part of the festival, is the exhibition. Browsing the laneways of the exhibition floor, discovering new talent that you love, how best to do that. And so what we ended up doing was partnering with the Toronto Hand-Eye Society and Canzine to build an exhibition website where you can go online at torontocomics.com, browse the works of over 400 creators, go from profile to profile, adding new and exciting books to your cart, check out once, and then 6 to 8 weeks later, a box full of awesome goodies will arrive at your door. It's not exactly what the festival is, it's traditionally, but I think it's pretty great, and I think you're really going to find a lot of work that you will love. And before I finally hand it off to Joe to get things really started, I just want to make a special thank you to our programming sponsor, Seneca College School of Creative Arts and Animation, and some additional thanks to the Canada Council for the Arts and the Ontario Art Council, and of course the Toronto Art Council. So our moderator for tonight is Joe Ollmann. He is an award-winning cartoonist whose works include This Will All End in Tears, Midlife, Happy Stories About Well-Adjusted People. His newest book, coming out later this May, is called Fictional Father, and he was the co-curator of the This Is Serious gallery show at the Art Gallery of Hamilton. Joe, take it away.
Thanks, Miles. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to our panel. I'm super excited to talk with these three great cartoonists today, and with you, the imaginary audience. Just to start off, I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the comic show that happened at the Art Gallery of Hamilton, and then I'll give a brief intro of our panelists, and then we'll get down to discussing the show and their work. I'm going to run a series of photos while I talk. The blurry photos are by me, and the professional in-focus photos are by Robert McNair, who does photography for the Art Gallery of Hamilton. Over the course of a year, we visited over 30 cartoonist studios in Hamilton, Toronto, and Montreal, and wrangled cartoonists further afield by email and phone and art shipping agencies. There were a lot of challenges in trying to do a show of this scale and trying to make it as complete in terms of history and also representative of the current scene. We wanted to include as many cartoonists as possible, but we also wanted all of the artists to get paid. And there was a finite budget and the limitations of the physical space of the museum as well. We started with an initial list of over 200 Canadian cartoonists and were forced to chop that to under 50. There were so many cartoonists that we wanted to have in the show, but we ran out of space. So if you're a cartoonist harboring deep resentment for not being in the show, you were probably definitely on that earlier list. There was a lot of pressure on getting this right. It's a giant gallery show, and the head curator told me one day on the street, she said, "This is the most expensive show we're doing all year." And after I threw up in the gutter, I said, I got to get this right. So our first considerations were to define what constituted indie comics in our mind. And and to realize if there was any theme in our show, it was basically personal narratives. That was the most important theme that we found. And we weren't really interested in more fantastical elements. We wanted real world kitchen sink stuff mostly. Briefly, the structure of the show was a Hamilton-related opening section with a historical component featuring older cartoonists such as Doug Wright and James Simpkins. And then moving on into the current Hamilton scene, there was a sidebar of 80 West Coast cartoonists, and then we had a room featuring the Big Four, which featured Fiona Smith, who we have here with us today, Chester Brown, Julius A., and Seth, four incredibly important formative figures in Canadian indie comics. Next, we had the Kids in the Hall, cartoonists whose work was important for its humorous content, one of whom, Hartley Lin, is here with us today as well. The name Kids in the Hall was a clever name for the fact that we ran out of room and started using the hall space to show more comics. That was just a necessary thing. And then came the largest gallery, which was a nationwide survey, which Eric, who is with us today, was in. And we attempted to capture the feeling of like a comic show or a zine fair, like just a mishmash of people and art. And the show was a pretty good success for the gallery. It was well attended, and it won an Ontario Art Gallery Curation Award. And it was favorably reviewed in the Globe and Mail and other places. But for me, the sense of success was when cartoonists who saw the show came and said, you did okay, old fella. So that was for me, that was the main thing, that it was okay for the cartoonists, and they were happy. And I forgot to flip my images. I'm so sorry. Anyway, I'm gonna I'll flip images while I am introducing my dear cartoonist here today. So Fiona Smith is a cartoonist and an educator whose visual stamp was omnipresent in the Toronto of the 80s and 90s, from gig posters, record covers, to venue signage, and further in the mind of the country, her comics and from her long-running strips in Exclaim magazine. She also influenced so many of the younger generation of cartoonists through teaching at OCAD. Her work is multidisciplinary, often endurance-based, lengthy projects, and is completely original in its visual sense. Her work is sex positive, body positive, and fiercely feminist. She was inducted into the Giants of the North, the Canadian Cartoonist Hall of Fame, at the Doug Wright Awards in 2019. Some of her books include Cheese, her incredible sex ed collaborations with Corey Silverbird, Sex is a Funny Word, and her omnibus career overview, Somnambulance, from Koyama Press. Hartley Lin is an incredibly thoughtful cartoonist. I know him to labor over his work excessively, and even amongst self-loathing cartoonists, he's incredibly hard on himself. But I also know that he has created, with his long-running series, Pope Hats, a body of work that is some of the best comics writing being done in the world, I think. His portrayal of office politics and women characters existing in those spaces, written realistically by a man, are fantastic. Hartley's work breaks your heart, affirms your faith in humanities, and it always makes me laugh. He'll be writhing in serious pain as I say these nice things about him. He has produced 6 issues of his comic Pope Hats since 2008, and his book Young Francis won the Doug Wright Award in 2019. He's a frequent contributor to Title Creek magazine and the New Yorker as well. Eric Costiak Williams works in a completely unique visual style. When I first saw Hungry Bottom Comics, I tried to figure out where this fully formed, totally distinct aesthetic sprang from, with its malleable figures and unconventional layouts. Eric makes comics that take on serious themes with absurdist humor and are equal part critiques of capitalism and the failures of urban planning and insights into queer culture. He's a regular contributor to the Now magazine. You should really look at his quarantine comics there. They're incredible, a sort of incredible capturing of the moment that we're in. And he has done work for The Believer magazine, as well as maintaining a busy illustration career. He has produced 3 issues of Hungry Bottom Comics and several books, including Our Wretched Town Hall and Condo Heartbreak Disco. Eric's Twitter account is where I learn all I need to know about the life and work of Kylie Minogue. I love all 3 of these cartoonists, and I'm so happy to be talking to them today. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Let's see here if I can do this. Sorry, is it gone?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. Oh no, I've got this thing up here. Sorry. Okay, I'm back. Hi everybody. Thanks for coming, guys. I'm going to start off just to discuss the show a bit, and then mostly I just want to talk about you guys' work. We'll talk about the show briefly, just to get your thoughts on it. If I don't think Hartley, you got to see it.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking fact of my life, but I think it happened the first year of my kid's life. I think it started then, so it's all a blur. I don't know. I made it out to a couple shows, but not this one.
Yeah, no, that wasn't meaning to center you out right off the bat. I know that Fiona and Eric have both seen the show. You're both at the opening. It was lovely to have you there. So anyway, I just want to talk about the show just in general terms, how it represents the comic scene in Canada. Just anybody wants to jump in and give their thoughts on the show. I don't know, Eric, you want to start? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, I kind of, even when I first met with you and Elena to talk about it, I couldn't have imagined just like how ambitious the scope was until I actually set foot into the space. Like, it was just like totally mind-blowing. I think one of my favorite things about it was seeing Fiona's work elevated to the same level as the other big three as it should be, you know? That was really gratifying for me to see as someone who's like an admirer. And just like, yeah, and the big room especially was super exciting, just like having such an intermingling of like people at different phases in their careers. I think mine was next to Nina Bunjevac. I might be mispronouncing her last name, but I've been admiring her work for years. I was like, oh, they put me next to the better crosshatcher. No, but it was just like incredible to wander. Like, I did go back after the opening once or twice, because obviously at an opening you can't fully absorb all the artwork because there's just so much going on. But yeah, it was super inspiring and just like so surreal to see all of our work in a museum setting. That's like something I'll remember forever.
Nice. Thanks, Eric. Fiona, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible historic moment to bring all these Canadian cartoonists together and show the breadth and the history of comics in Canada. And yeah, just seeing how you guys laid it out in space and what a beautiful space it was too. And the import that was given to this medium and the history of it in Canada. And yeah, it was a heart-swelling moment to see cartoonists that I love included in it. And then yeah, my moment of being in the big four is still mind-boggling and much appreciated.
Important for us too. Like I just feel like you're such an important artist in terms of influence on other younger cartoonists, and just to me your work was everywhere, and your visual style is completely unique and often imitated. So anyway,
thank you.
Fiona, were you able to include some of your large-scale paintings from, the 90s?
No, but there was this time-based project that involved, like, it was a year of drawing the same size drawing and tracing over them. That ended up being over 2,000 drawings, and that became a slideshow, and that was like larger than life-size figures. So in a way, yeah, the scale was in that slideshow, but not the, but I was part of the back pages show. So there was a painting that I did on site for the zine room, and that echoed my earlier large paintings and murals. And was really great to be able to do that and be in the space too. That was towards the end of the show. It was like, I think I did it in October or November. But to go in there for like 3 or 4 days in a row and work on that painting was great, because then I could go around and see the work again more and pour over stuff.
What happened with that painting that you did from that residency?
AGH, we're looking into seeing if it could get donated somewhere, if there might be somebody interested in taking it, but I think in the end, it ended up in the dumpster. I mean,
Oh, it's in the dumpster. That's perfect.
but you know, when I created it, I knew it was probably just for that moment, and it wasn't created in an archival sense. Like it was photocopies and acrylic painting on plywood. And also when you do mural kind of work, you know you're giving up the chance of keeping something, right? You know it's a limited time, so it's fine.
Okay. I want to ask you all. You can get in on this one too, Hartley. Just if someone gave you a big chunk of money and gave you the reins and said you can do a show of Canadian comics, what would you do? Like, just any idea?
Well, in my case, I would hope to do as good a job as you did. I was kind of reflecting on when I first heard about the show. I just got an email from you out of the blue, and it was so understated. It was like, I'm just going to do a little art show in Hamilton. Would you like to possibly contribute a couple pages? And I'm like, of course, anything you want. And then I started seeing photos of the space, and it was kind of incredible to me. It was kind of like, you know, as an artist, you're always like, you know, the world should respect us like this, and we should have this and this and this. And this was an actual, you know, manifestation of all those dreams. And it made me really curious. I was like, I can't think of any sort of undertaking similar to it. And I was wondering if you had any sort of reference points in mind when you started to shape the show.
Well, Deanna Tamblyn had done a show at the London Museum, which was like 12 cartoonists. So it was a smaller show, but it was like I visited that and talked to her, and that was helpful in just in terms of ideas, how to present things. But the museum was incredible. The Art Gallery of Hamilton, they were incredible. They sunk so much money into this thing, and they really wanted the artists to get paid, and they were so supportive. They were like, we come to them and go, Eric's got a picture of it's important in his oeuvre, but there's penetration with a and they were like, we're going to show it to the director and we'll get back to you. And I go, it's very important. It's a very important spread, and to their credit, they were like totally on board with everything. And I said, you know, we had Julie Doucet's stuff, the menstruation comics with the giant Julie running through the city menstruating, and that, to me, that image, it's so good and so amazing and so forward thinking, and it's so important in her work that, like I said, we got to have that in there. And Julie said in an email, she goes, well, if my work's so important in Canadian comics, why aren't you including that? And I was like, good point. We went and did it. So it was like, she kind of like pushed us a little, which was great. And the Art Gallery of Hamilton, Toby and Shelley Falconer, the director, they were all super supportive of everything. Like there was never anything that they said, no, we can't have that. So I'm really happy for that. There was one thing, I wanted to have little rubber gloves that go through a glass case to flip through people's sketchbooks, and they wouldn't let me do that. So
oh no, that would have been really cool. Yeah.
Stolen from me. So anyway, anyone else? What would be your dream thing, like of a comic show? Like,
I mean, like, go ahead, Fiona.
Oh, you go ahead.
I mean, you did it pretty amazingly, Joe. I feel like I would take, like, if I had an infinite budget, I would just take your show and like bring it to like every city and small town across Canada. Like, I just can't imagine, like, even like I grew up in Ottawa, which isn't even a small city, but like growing up, I just had no idea that this kind of work existed, you know? Like, I can't imagine what effect that would have had on me had I seen it like in high school or even earlier. So, and maybe that could happen someday, you know, because you talked about like touring it at a couple different places.
There was
right?
a couple of museums were interested, and then the show in Germany, the Erlanger Festival in Germany. We were showing it there. We were going to send work over there, and all the artists. It was a limited part of the show. It wasn't the full show, but it was still pretty big. And then this happened, so that was canceled because of that. The festival was canceled, and so that was that. I really wish it had another like iteration somewhere else, but it's fine. I was proud for my scabby city that it was there, because it's like it seemed like Seth wrote to me the night of the opening, and he goes, "I think you've done something historic," and I was like, it was like people like that, and Julie Doucet came to visit, and she said, "I really like the show," and oh God, I'm just like, oh. I was so gratified that people didn't think that we mucked it up, and Alana was like amazing. She's a cartoon, like she reads comics, but she's not like super into them entirely, but she is a curator and a brilliant organizer, and just she got it immediately, and just it was so good. It was like an amazing collaboration. And the show, I think what my hope is that it would just like normalize comics in a gallery setting, like and that we could have more of them potentially. Like I'm bugging them at the art gallery now I want to do a show of Montreal screen printing artists, because I think that's an under realized thing that people don't even know about, and I just like I want people to see that. So anyway, there, I'm announcing it here. Toby, I want to do that show. Anyway, Fiona, you were going to say what you would do.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, what you guys created at AGH is amazing, and it has to travel. Could it travel at some point?
I think all the art's been returned to everybody now, so it would be a wrangling thing. It was complicated. Like we had the art shipping. They kept talking to me about like Melissa Neal, who was organizing everything. She was the person who kept everything juggled, and she said, she would say like, "Oh, we're spending like this much on shipping," and I'm like, Kate Beaton was on an island. I think they had to row over on a boat to get her originals, and it was like, well, we had who's the artist? Carol Mazowicz, who is like one of my favorite artists. When I first envisioned doing the show, it was her work that I wanted in there. It was this piece that I remember. It was a historical piece about a Canadian Japanese soldier who gave back his medals after he was interred during the Second World War, and that showed me, like, when I was a kid, what comics could do, like what you could actually do with comics, and so we were able to get that in the show. So I was pleased with that. I'm glad you guys liked it. That makes me very happy.
I just wanted to give a shout out to a show that happened in Toronto in the late 80s. Pete Daiko, who's a cartoonist and musician and painter, used to have a zine called Casual that was like the Raw or the Weirdo of Canada. And he organized a show called the Casual Cultural Exchange in the late 80s. And so that had a lot of Canadian cartoonists in it, but it also had cartoonists from around the world, and French, Japanese, American. But that, and it was really just in one room on Queen Street. It wasn't the scope of your show at the AGH, but there it was a precedent to this, and there probably been other smaller ones, but that was it felt large, especially at the time, and very, very underground comics kind of scene. So
That's
I just
so
want
cool.
to put that up.
Yeah, I think you introduced me to Pete some TCAF a few years ago. And I remember it might have been you, or he may have just come up and said, hey, but he gave me a couple old issues of Casual that I still have somewhere. They're incredible. They're such a little like artifact of the time. Yeah, they're awesome.
I wonder if there's any like archiving of that show. Like, would there be any images from it? Like,
well, there was a catalog for it too.
Cool.
which I want to go grab. I just got
Yeah, I'd love to see it. That's awesome.
Hartley, you're back. You were gone there.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I have spotty Wi-Fi. Just
Oh, it's
let me come in and out.
No worries. Yeah.
right beside this is serious.
Oh, thanks for showing that.
Ooh,
Here's it's a double cover.
cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'll hold that catalog again. We're gonna give a shout out to the catalog. So
This is serious catalog?
oh, I got one too. Oh, here. Thanks, Fiona. So this is, you can probably buy this at the Beguiling or at the Art Gallery of Hamilton, although I think they're in lockdown. It's published by Conundrum Press and the Art Gallery of Hamilton. Yeah, that's all. The Beguiling probably has it for sale. It's essays by Jeet here, Peggy Burns. There's images from all of the artists involved, and both the co-curators did a essay. Mine's in comics form because that's what I do. So, okay. So I think that's, I don't know, we'll probably touch on the show again, but I want to talk about you guys and your work, because there were various reasons why I had each of you in the show, but I thought of all of you right away. There were some people like that I initially knew. I'm like, I gotta have them in the show, and you were all those people. So I want to ask about. I mean, it's a stupid question, but I want to know how you came to comics. Like, were you a lifelong devotee practitioner of the form, or were you a relative latecomer? Anybody can start.
Maybe I'll start. Okay. So I grew up in Toronto, and there were comics around me. You know, there's the Silver Snail, and I always remember seeing, like, I was buying superhero comics, but I remember seeing Yummy Fur, issues of Yummy Fur and by Chester Brown, and flipping through them and being like, whoa, what is this? This is like very strange. And, you know, it took me until, I guess, my university years to discover that and really appreciate it. But I'm mentioning Toronto because it kind of, you know, it was sort of around you. Like, I feel like even though I didn't know Fiona Smith was the author of this particular book and, you know, these comics in Vice and in, I think, Now or one of those weeklies, you know, I was aware of her stuff just from, you know, Sneaky D's and the murals she did all over the city. And, like, you know, as I get older, I really appreciate how special that was. And when I discovered Chester Brown and Seth and Joe Matt's comics and how their autobio stories would intersect, it was kind of a revelation to me, because it made me realize, like, oh, this is the Toronto I know. And it kind of gave me permission to be an artist from the city, whereas you always kind of view art as like some other thing that other people do. You know, like, people make movies in Hollywood, people have exciting lives in New York, but this was the first kind of iteration of like, oh, these are Toronto stories and they're pretty exciting. So I was really deeply influenced by, you know, those three artists and others in Toronto. You also mentioned screen printing in Montreal. I went to school in Montreal, and yeah, it was also kind of it was a different, more chaotic world of art, but there was definitely like the influence of Seri Pop's gig posters, and I know that those guys influenced Michael DeForge, whose work I love. So I guess, just like personally, I feel like really lucky that I came from these cities that had a lot of kind of exciting culture going on. So I started doing kind of, I don't know, just kind of stories that reflected, you know, the lives of my friends. We were all in our early 20s at the time, and I started self-publishing them and, you know, offering them at the Beguiling. And then I started doing shows in Toronto, and I met a bunch of cool artists like you guys there.
You send out your comics to a lot of people back in those days, I remember, because you sent Pope Hats to me, the first one.
Yeah, like, it's very embarrassing because it's kind of like, you know, there wasn't so much like kind of Facebook, Instagram stuff. It was very much more like just hand-to-hand copies of stuff. But even then, I feel like I was kind of like going over, like, I don't know, doing something a bit, it was kind of like an assault. Like I would just send copies of stuff, like free stuff to like artists I admired. And I wouldn't have ever met them. And I think the first time I got a response or like any letter from an artist was from Adrian Tomine. It was just like kind of crazy to see his like handwriting on a postcard. But yeah, I used to do that. And I still kind of like, I still am of that mindset where it's like it's such like a romantic kind of practice that I kind of really only care about what a few people think about my work. And I just like, I'm like, read my stuff. I want you to like it.
That's great. Eric, how about you? How about your introduction to comics?
Yeah, I think I've been drawing kind of obsessively from as early as like 5 or 6. I guess the benefit of doing these chats from home is I actually uncovered a box of like really old drawings. I have one of them like right here. From like 5 and 6, I was really obsessed. Like Sailor Moon and the X-Men animated show were both airing on TV, and I used to do all these like Sailor Moon drawings. And it kind of grew into comic strips. And like I didn't really have any other hobbies growing up. So I started, I think in middle school or high school, I started photocopying my own comics and giving them out to friends. And then I would also, in the 2000s, there was a couple of websites that could do print on demand for you. So that was the first time I like had something printed that looked like kind of profesh. But I moved to Toronto from Ottawa in 2008 for university. And it was really, I kind of put comics on the back burner for a bit because I was like kind of entering a new phase of life and coming into myself a bit more. But then I walked into the Beguiling for the first time, and this is at the old Markham location where there'd just be like zines, comics, graphic novels just spilling out from like every shelf and corner. And it was totally like mind blowing. And particularly the first TCAF I went to that year, it was a really special time for me. And I think like in general for Toronto comics, because Annie Koyama was just starting Koyama Press. Like I think 2009 or 10 was my first TCAF, and I remember her table was like small but packed with like really cool stuff. And there was the first issue of Lose by Michael DeForge, and some of the artist books she was putting out, and just like wandering around and seeing what everyone was making made me feel like, because before growing up, like I was doing my own thing, but none of my friends were, and none of my friends liked comics. It always just felt like this weird thing that I like to do. But for the first time, it kind of clicked, and I felt like it would be possible to pursue it a bit more seriously. So in the middle of going to school at OCAD, I wanted to start making autobio comics because I'd been reading a lot of underground stuff from like the 70s, 80s, 90s. And it was actually taking Fiona's class that helped launch all of that, because something I'll always really appreciate, she let the assignments be super open-ended. So I may have even asked her at the time, I don't remember, but just being like, are you okay if I use your class to like start making a full comic? And that's how the first issue of Hungry Bottom Comics came together. And the stars kind of lined up in a cool way where as I was accumulating more pages and thinking about how to print it, I got a blast email from Jess Jeet, who announced that he was starting Color Code, because he'd been doing a bit of Rhizo stuff and printing the free drawings newspapers in the late 2000s, but the timing was just like perfect. Like I'd never really seen Rhizographed stuff before, and he could do lower print runs. So yeah, I took him up on it, saved money from my serving job, and At one of my first TCAFs, I was thinking when you mentioned Hartley sending your stuff out to people you admired, before making Hungry Bottom comics, I had my first TCAF table with a couple of like small shitty zines. And after meeting Annie for the first time, I sent her this like very overconfident email at 19 years old, being like, I think you should publish me, and here's why, and like, here's my stuff. And to her great credit, she got back and was very polite. She was like, I have a lot going on right now. Like, I'm booked for a while, but like, I will follow your stuff. And she did over time. Like, she became someone I would see around and say hi to. And then a few years later, when I was starting a new project, which would become Condo Heartbreak Disco, she reached out about working together. So that, I don't know, it all just felt like a really lovely full circle moment. And I'm still doing it, I guess.
Good. I want to talk more later about everybody, what they're working on. But Fiona, I want to hear about you and comics. How'd you come to this humble art form?
I grew up in Montreal, and so in our house we would have Asterix and Obelix. And then there was a couple of times we went to visit my mother's cousin in Scotland, who is very into Tintin. So I'd see Tintin there. And then we had cousins in Lachine, just outside Montreal, or suburb of Montreal, and they had Mad Magazine and compilations of Peanuts and other comics. And there was one summer we went away with our cousins who lived in Lachine, the Campbells. Hey, Campbells. And there were, and this would have been in the 70s, and there were tons of boxes of EC comics, those, right, the horror stuff. And so reading that stuff. But when I got to OCAD, when it was called OCA, before it became a university, I was reading, I didn't know anything about underground comics or alternative comics. I was reading Daredevil, the Frank Miller stuff, and Elektra and Bill Sienkiewicz. I'm not saying his name right, but seeing that stuff. But there was one day I went into Dragon Lady on Queen Street, the comic book store, and saw Chester Brown's Yummy Fur, self-published Yummy Fur, and that was just a pivotal moment of seeing what comics could be, and seeing Chester's work introduced me to the underground stuff. And I would sometimes go into Silver Snail, and Mark Asquith was working there at the time, and he would say, you got to check out the Hernandez brothers, or you got to check out Dan Clo's work. And then being at OCA with Maurice Fellacoup, he's like, you got to check out Raw magazine. So Maurice introduced me to like more like the art comics. So then, I left OCA, was doing art shows, was making a name for myself as a painter and painting in clubs. And when I had art shows, I would make zines to sell. And those were like mini comics, right? And continue to, I guess, do painting and shows and more comics along the way. And then eventually Nocturnal Emissions with Vortex Comics, and for only 4 issues, sadly. But and also I colored some NASCAR comics because they were Bill Marks was publishing NASCAR comics, so I was coloring some of those under the pseudonym James, which sounds like a good old boy's Southern name.
Like Jane Smith?
Is that a colorist?
No, what was the name that you used?
Hank James.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like a Southern name. And then eventually I was doing more illustration work and comics along the way, but just like spottily for anthologies, and got to be in Twisted Sisters Volume 2, and I know I'm going to forget stuff along the way because it's been a long ass time. and then eventually, yeah, so having the fine art career, doing some comics, doing illustration work, but along the way, getting hired by Paul Dallas at the time to teach a sequential narrative class at OCAD, which eventually became called the graphic novel illustration class, which is a terrible name, and eventually it'll be called comics.
Oh, they call it that now? That's great. I love that.
Yeah. And you know, I was making work at the same time as the Holy Triumvirate and Julie Doucet, but you know, in my own little world. And of course, I didn't pursue it as streamlined as they did. It was like part of my practice, but not the whole focus of it. So yeah, over the years we would cross paths, but I was kind of on my own separate way. And then when I started teaching comics at OCAD, that feels like that was a turning point of like returning to comics and me making more comics and participating in Zine Fest and also following my students' work, like going to see Eric at shows and picking up stuff. And of course, I just want to say, yeah, Eric came into that class fully formed. I didn't give you anything. Like when you put up an autobio comic about going to see Will Monroe's show at NYU, and yeah, I almost started crying because it was so beautiful and just like this celebration of Will Monroe's work and of you and Zab seeing this work and understanding this history of queer artists in Toronto and the impact that Will had, and it just, yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, so eventually in my journey, I crossed paths with Annie Koyama. I mean, this could become a whole Annie Koyama panel. We ran into each other at a kids art drop-in center on Sherborne. That I think she was part of the board there and was volunteering, and I was working there at the time. I had been in a voluntary capacity, but then was working there and drawing comics with kids and actually Dave Lapp got me into another kind of drop-in kids center and doing comics and art with kids, which led me to feel confident enough to teach at OCA. So shout out to Dave Lapp. Yeah, so eventually over the years, Annie's like, you know, we should do something together. And we were talking about doing some kind of an anthology, but you know, there's some pretty amazing anthologies out there and also some super weak ones too. And the conversation eventually turned into, why don't we do a collection of your work? And Somnambulance was born. So big thank you to Annie for that.
Fiona, was there a point in your storied career where you kind of became interested in teaching and sort of like Eric took a class with you, and I think we can name like a ton of really influential Toronto artists like Wowie Zonk, Jeanette, and Chris and Patrick, and I think was Jesjeet also in your class?
No,
because I was kind of aware of his gig posters before he did printing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, it seems that, you know, you do your own work, but you've also like just very personally influenced, you know, many artists. And was that kind of a conscious decision on your part?
It was a terrifying decision of how do I make money, right? How do
That's right. Right.
Yeah, and I can't take credit for these awesome artists like Wowie Zonk. They're just like Eric. They came into the room and they were already producing great comics and had an idea of what they wanted to do. So if anything, I hope I just make room for folks to continue exploring their voice and get their work out there. And then, you know, hopefully there's some other folks who are just discovering comics, and then I'm showing them the way. But the folks that Wowie Zonk and Eric already had it.
But like, don't sell yourself short though, because like I think the mere fact of like you creating the room for us in that class to experiment and like push ourselves, like I still remember that class so well, even though it was like probably like almost 10 years ago. And I remember, I know, but I still remember like all of my classmates, there are quite a few of them who had never done comics like of any kind. But just like the opportunity to do so in kind of like a really open, supportive environment, like they were all doing really cool stuff by the end. Like it was really like inspiring to see just everyone's growth over like a few months or something. So I don't know, like that was one of the best moments I had in school. So thanks.
So you said that you're going to be doing workshops. Are you teaching comics or?
Yeah, I shortly before lockdown, I did a 10-week teaching thing with AGO youth, which was really fun. I was so nervous about it as someone who's never really done that, but it was an amazing group of students, like, and kind of ideal because they apply to be part of this group. So they're all like keeners and really energetic. And also a wide range of ages from like 15 to 24. So like at various different points in their lives. And we made like a big comic together responding to the Hito Stero exhibit that was at the AGO, which is like very kind of like intense technology-based media art stuff. But yeah, it's something I'd love to do more of. I'm gonna do like a 2-hour, I think it will have happened by the time we air this, at the Scarborough Arts Center, just like a 2-hour zine workshop thing. But yeah, it'd be like teaching would be amazing. I would like to do it when we're not all in Zoom school because it seems challenging, but who knows? I don't know. We'll see.
Teaching on Zoom has to be tricky, especially if like when you're in a class, you could actually like get on the paper and like, I don't know if it happens. I've never been to art school. But you know what Fiona, what you were saying, like, I think you can't underestimate a good influence of a teacher and the kindness of a teacher and a mentor who brings confidence to kids. Like that's, to me, I think, like immeasurably good, and you do that like crazy. So anyway, okay, thanks everybody. That was good. Those were great career what's the word I'm looking for? Recaps. Yes, thank you. So I want to ask about like your place in comics, like the clique within the world of comics, or do you have a group of people that you collaborate with or you share values with? Like who are your people in comics? Like I know when I was in Montreal, I had my friends Billy Mavrez and Todd Stewart, and we got together every week and
Pascal Gerard
states, and we collaboratively drew these monster heads. They're horrendous. But it was beautiful. I don't have anything like that. I'm kind of a hermit, and all the Hamilton cartoonists are hermits. There's Dave Collier and there's Sylvia Nickerson, but we're all hermits. I know we're all hermits anyway now. We're all hermits by that life. Anyway, so anyone, maybe Hartley, do you have a clique? Do you have people that you work with?
In Montreal, so in Toronto, it was a really great situation. I remember I was hanging out pretty like pseudo regular with DeForge. He was really interested, like towards the start of his career. I think we both put out our first issue of our one-man anthologies within the same year. So it's really just exciting to know him. And I was friends with Chester Brown and artists like Jason Kiefer and Nick Mandag. Now I'm in Montreal, and it's a bit kind of like there's a lot of artists, a lot of cartoonists here. It's a bit split by language. There are a lot of great Quebec artists, but I don't know them too well. But I hang out with Connor Williamson every now and then, and he's like a huge inspiration. Like I find that I've been lucky. If I do nothing else in comics, I feel like I could say like I was friends with DeForge and Connor Williamson, and they're like the best artists of their generation in my view, and that's really heartening for me. And Connor's kind of like incredible mind. Like I think he would be a great professor, like a crazy wacky professor, because he has like a lot of theories about comics. But yeah, it's mostly Connor, I guess, I hang out with. And I think I'm one of like the old school type cartoonists who's pretty antisocial by nature.
Okay. How about you, Eric?
Oh, well, we were getting into, just before lockdown, there was a really nice groove where after they closed up at the Beguiling, they would like send a few texts out to people just being like, we're going drinking in the neighborhood. So I was really enjoying going to more of those in the last couple of years. And there'd usually be like Jeanette and Patrick and Michael Como. Michael Como's been probably the cartoonist I hang out with the most over the last like 5-ish years. He's very like opposite from a lot of cartoonists in terms of you can talk your ear off for like 5 hours, which I love because I'm not always like that. And we've made a point of trying to go on walks and stuff over the last year. I'd seen Sami Alwani around for a couple years, and after TCAF in 2019, we were like, we should be like real friends. So we've made a point of staying in touch, and I love his work. And a lot of my time doing comics professionally has been surrounded by people a little bit older than me who've been more established. So it's really exciting also getting to know people more in my age bracket or a bit younger even, just to see like where it's all going. And Jillian Tamaki lives like 10 minutes away from me. So we've become closer buds in the last couple of years. And she's just like always really great to chat to and always working on amazing stuff. But yeah, no, I look forward to when we're all able to hang out again, because I think since we're already predisposed to be a bit hermity, it's been hard to keep in touch with people over the last year in this field, especially.
Yeah. Okay, Fiona. Tell us about your people, and we're running low on time, so we're gonna, after you're done that, I'm gonna ask you one more question, and that'll probably be a wrap up, I think. So go ahead, Fiona. Take your time.
When I was at OCAD or OCA at the time, it was Maurice Balakoop, right? Hanging out, but I think these days we just talk on the phone and sometimes get together, but really in hermit mode. like even before the pandemic, he's working on his amazing graphic memoir, and I've been working on the third book in the kids sex education series with Corey Silverberg, and the third book is like slightly over 400 pages. So yeah, it's just been a massive book. So then, yeah, over the years, Michael Como has certainly been along the way, and Mark Connery, and I should mention back in the OCA, like Maurice and Roxana Bicadora, when we did a comic called Fabulous Babes together. And first it was a zine a couple of times, and then it was a comic. I wrote down because I was going to forget names. And I guess in the last, well, not last year, but the year before, a couple of ex-students who are becoming friends, but of course we haven't spent time together. And actually, Morgan C was part of, and maybe they're continuing to have comics get together online. But I didn't stick with it because I'm drawing all day. So like drawing comics during a Zoom isn't the most fun. But yeah, I hope to see and draw with Morgan C sometime again. And Natty Medina Romero, who is an ex-student who was here but then moved back to Chile. and sometimes they're hanging out, maybe a little drawing, but mostly talking about their work or whatever. Anyway, but for the most part, it's just like hermit. Apart from events like TCAF and zine events, Zine Dream or Canzine, and then I see people and hang out.
Joe, I know we're running low on time, but I want to ask you one last question. So if I have the timeline right, you've got a new book out right now called Fictional Father, and I got to read an early copy of it, and it's incredible. Like it's amazing on so many levels. And were you working on that book while curating the show?
I was. It was like I was totally immersed in an acid bath.
Yeah, because the book is about comics and like generations of cartoonists.
Actually, under the dust jacket, the French flap of my book, there's a love note to comics, because I wrote about that. Like I was working on this at the same time as and I never got tired of it. And so I realized that I found my thing. Like comics are my thing. And I there were so many times I was making speeches at this comics thing, and every time comics, I tear up. I love it so much, and I love the cartoonists, and I love the people, and I love the energy, and I love the community and the togetherness, and I love the shows like you got old people and you got young queer people.
Yeah.
Like it's like I love it. I love it all, and I never get tired of it. I all I want to do is read comics and make comics and talk about comics. So I feel like I'm the luckiest man. So yes, I was doing that at the same time. I think I'm gonna ask you one quick question, just a quick response, because I think Miles is here and he's gonna take over in a minute. So I just want to ask quickly, like what's changed about comics since you came into it, or what's wrong with comics? You can do either one of those. You can pick one. How has the scene changed since you came in, or what's wrong with this damn comics scene?
I think Instagram's changed comics a lot. There's a lot going on. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. But like the stuff that's good is like incredible.
Yeah, well put. Instagram is so major, just with like the little tile scrolly situation. I think in my own work, it's forced me into more of a grid type of thing, which is like good in some ways, but I miss having the room to be more expansive and like noodly with page compositions. I think the main bad thing that's happened to comics is just like the cities getting too expensive to live in. Like people just don't have enough time to like hang out and like shoot the shit, because that's where like all the great ideas come from, you know? It's just like hanging out at bars together and doodling. So I would love to be able to do more of that.
Fiona?
Yeah, I mean, well, Joe can attest to that. And I believe I'm older than you, but they're like, it used to be such a small scene, and like now, yeah, it's so large, and it's so much about who are the artists and what are the stories that they're telling, and that's a totally different looking crowd than what was initially the Canadian comic scene, especially in Toronto in like the 80s. Yeah, it's great how it's changed in that way.
You were one of the rare like women in comics at the time. Like it was just such a dude's world. Like it really was. But that's changed dramatically, and obviously for the better. It's I also find it's interesting, like people that maybe didn't grow up in comics and they're dropped into it and they have no history, so they have no hang-ups, and they do completely takes on things, and it's amazing. I love that shit.
Yeah.
One of my friends, we haven't been in touch so much just because they've been moving around a lot, but one of my friends, Tommy Parrish, who's from Australia, but has been lived in Montreal for a while. They, I think, only got introduced to comics like during university and were from more of a fine art background. And it's fascinating seeing how the reference points are so different. Like it's something I told the AGO students is just like, look, look outside of your immediate scene as well as in it, you know, like there's just so much, it's cool to see different inspiration work its way in. It's awesome.
Yeah, Tommy Parrish's work is amazing. I just got that new Kuss comic that they did, and it's amazing. I'm always, and again, it's totally unique. It's but it still has narrative, because I'm a narrative junkie, and I love that. I like noodly, but I'm like with Fiona, with your stuff in the show, I was like, this is way more narrative. Let's put this one in. I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, I don't know. Like that's just my way. I'm stuck on that. Anyway, so I think we're gonna wrap it up, unless anybody has anything they want to add. Okay.
Check out, Sex by me and Corey Silverberg next year.
Ooh, exciting. That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Let's do check in. Tell us what so Fiona, you've got, what's this new book entitled?
Sex.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Those books, Corey and you, are amazing. I bought them for my kid, and they're so cool, and they cover everything, and there's no hangups, and it's beautiful. I love it. Okay. You work out. Sorry, Eric?
Oh, sorry, that was me. Well, last year, you can still check them out online. Like I was doing some weekly comics for now last spring, just like as the pandemic was unfolding. Currently, I'm starting to work on something extremely long, which is exciting and terrifying, and probably won't materialize for a few years. So wish me luck. That's where I'll be.
Historical project, the historical project you were working on, you were doing research in San Francisco?
Yeah, that's going to play into it somewhat. Yeah, I'm going to be able to do some research and writing over the summer and fall, and then hopefully get going on drawing the whole thing starting next year. So it's going to be my first time thinking full, like big graphic novel length. We'll see how it goes.
It's just a longer comic. It's no big deal.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
Well, Hartley, you have a young kid, so you're not working on anything. Come on. What are you working?
Trying to. I'm really trying to. So I'm kind of in the same boat as Eric. I'm working on my second book, and it's supposed to be a longer book. I don't want to say the name because I might change it at the last minute, but it's about like doomed teenagers, and I'm digging it.
Nice. Oh, that sounds great. Those all sound amazing. Looking forward to all of them. Okay, thanks for coming today, guys. I do love you all, and I love your work, and I think you're great, and I'm so glad you were here to talk. This was a nice chat.
Sure, thanks for having us. Oh my God.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Now I come back. That was so awesome and so great. I've been working on TCAF since 2010, and because of this unique format this year, this is the first kickoff panel I've been able to see since 2010. So
oh God,
it was so great. So thank you all for being a part of the kickoff for this year's show. Just to wrap up, a few last housekeeping things. Once again, thanks to the programming sponsor, Seneca College School of Creative Arts and Animation. Special thanks, of course, to the Beguiling Books and Art and Page and Panel, the TCAF shop, as well as the TCAF, which wouldn't be possible without the support of our government funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Art Council, and the Toronto Art Council. Please visit torontocomics.com to see more programming like this, as well as those 300 exhibitors from all over the world I was talking about before. The online exhibition runs from May 8th to May 15th, with new programming going live every day. One program I will shout out is going live on Tuesday, May 11th. It's called Protest Comics and features Durf Durf, Nate Powell, and Ho-Che Anderson, the artist of the great TCAF poster that I'm standing in front of today. That should be really great. So yeah, it's all on torontocomics.com. I hope you check it out and have a good TCAF, everybody.